Well, everyone, the Google Pixel 5 is one of those devices that came out a few years ago, and I wanted to go ahead and kind of hit on how this particular phone is still holding up in 2025 and see if it's still worth buying, if there's some other options here and there. We'll take a look at that throughout this whole entire video. Now, first things first, if you want to pick up the Google Pixel 5 or some other phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Google Pixel 5, the first thing you have to remember is that this was supposed to be kind of like a mid-tier budget phone back in the day. This wasn't really supposed to be like $1,000 phone. This was supposed to be, I believe, like a $699 or $749 type of device. So this thing wasn't supposed to be super expensive. It was one of those middle-of-the-road type of devices when it kind of comes down to it. Now, on the front side of the Google Pixel 5, you're getting a 6-inch OLED display. It's 90 Hz and it's a pretty good-looking type of panel when it kind of comes down to it. There's not really anything on this type of panel that is super outdated. Just a few things. One, there's a 90 Hz display on this thing, which is actually still a higher refresh rate than what we're getting on the iPhone 16e. So that right there is actually a pretty insane thing in and of itself. You're also still maintaining a hole punch display, but the bezel around the display is a little bit more than what you'd expect maybe in a majority of like flagship phones. But the biggest thing, and this is probably one of the biggest takeaways here, is that with the Google Pixel 5, this type of display technology on the front really isn't that great. It's a standard OLED display, but the newer dynamic OLED displays or the Super Retina XDR OLED displays, those things are very good, and I love those displays a lot. And this one, on the other hand, it's not the best display of all time, and that's just kind of one of those like minor little things to kind of think about there when it kind of comes down to it. But ultimately, it's not really even like that big of a deal when it kind of comes down to it. On the bottom, you're getting a USB Type-C port, which is always super fun to have. I love having USB Type-C, and you were essentially getting that inside of this type of device too. You're also going to be able to go through and get this like aluminum type of back. So this was always something that was kind of surprising to me. Like having these types of backs, I think are, it's great, it's good, nothing really super bad about it, but it would be nicer to have a back on these types of phones that might be giving you a little bit more capability, and that's just kind of what's going on in this particular situation. So it's not the biggest deal in the world, but that could be just one other thing you might be end up experiencing here. You're also getting this dual camera setup on the backside, the fingerprint sensor on the backside as well. So this phone, ultimately, there's a few key takeaways here. One, the front panel, not too bad, but it's not 120 Hertz, not super bright. It's a little bit outdated, but not too outdated. You're still maintaining a good build quality, but most phones nowadays are giving us like frosted glass backs, a triple camera setup, and some sort of fingerprint sensor built inside of the display. So those are kind of a few takeaways that a majority of flagships have nowadays that this phone is already kind of missing out on. On top of that, you do have wireless charging on this phone, but there is no reverse wire charging inside, or no reverse wireless charging inside of this device. It all has to be wired, and that right there can also be a pretty big disadvantage inside of this type of device too. Because if you're wanting the phone that's going to be giving you more capability, once again, that is one key takeaways that you're going to have to remember here, because it could be giving you some issues when it comes down to that side. So I will tell you, when it comes down to those things, I'm a big fan of these particular devices, but it is a little bit different when it kind of comes down to it from that side. Now, another very big thing to keep in mind here too is that with the Google Pixel 5, this phone is basically going to be costing you not super expensive, but you could probably buy it for around $100 and something nowadays, which is actually not a bad price to pay for these types of phones. So once again, that in and of itself too is like another really big thing to keep in mind there when you're going through and picking up this type of phone. So ultimately, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. When it comes down to the camera side, this particular phone is going to be giving you a dual camera setup on the back side. So a 12.2 megapixel wide angle lens, then a 16 megapixel ultra wide camera, and then an 8 megapixel sensor on the front side. So with this type of device, you're going to have to remember that if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, these types of phones are still going to be giving you a pretty decent experience when it comes down to the camera side. So you're getting 4K at 60 on the back, but you're going to have to remember that you're only getting 1080p on the front side. This was kind of a problem with a lot of different Pixel phones at the time, because it was always feeling like you were getting kind of a lackluster experience on the front side, and that's just kind of what ends up happening here. And I did feel like if you were to go through and pick up a different type of device, it would have been a lot nicer had you been able to go through and buy a phone that might be able to give you a little bit more experience with that camera side. So again, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but when it does kind of come down to the camera, you might be feeling like you're getting a little bit of an outdated type of lens when it comes down to it. But it's not the biggest deal in the world, but that could be just one of those type of minor things you might be end up experiencing here for the most part. So from that side too, that is kind of one of those, small minor things to keep in mind there, from that particular side. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to its software longevity, this is kind of, one of those advantages for something like a Google Pixel 5. This type of phone is going to be giving you a pretty decent experience when it comes down to its software longevity. At least it was giving you a pretty decent experience. The best advantage for a lot of these Google Pixels is that they're going to be supported with software for a long period of time. So you're going to be able to go through and, get a pretty long supported device for the most part. So that is going to be a pretty good advantage for this type of phone too. So if I'm going to go through and pick up a device, I want to be able to go and buy one of these types of phones that's going to be getting software support. The only disadvantage here is that with something like a Google Pixel 5, this phone is kind of done getting software support. So it's not really going to be supported with software that much longer. So that could be kind of a disadvantage here as well. Like if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, well, it would be nicer to be able to go through and buy a device that's going to be giving you a little bit more capability here. Unfortunately, with something like a Google Pixel 5, this type of device isn't really going to be supported with software for like an insane more amount of time. So it would be nicer to go and kind of upgrade to a different device. So kind of keep that in mind there when it comes down to it too. When it comes down to battery life, this phone is still going to be giving you a 4080 mAh battery, but a big thing to keep in mind is that this phone is probably not going to be supported with software, or it's not going to have the best battery life, and the battery has probably degraded a bit too when it kind of comes down to it as well. So that right there is going to be another one of those big major things to keep in mind here too. So if you're wanting a better phone here, once again, you might have to look at one of these types of devices and try to get a better device when it comes down to that side as well. Finally, when it comes down to the performance, this phone is going to be giving you the Qualcomm Snapdragon 765G chipset inside with 8 gigs of RAM. So this is in and of itself another one of those big advantages here, because once again, if you're going to go through and get these types of phones, you're probably going to feel like these types of devices are probably going to feel like these phones aren't going to be like super insane or super crazy or anything like that. And that is going to be another one of those things to keep in mind here too, because these devices are still great, but the performance really isn't the biggest asset for this type of device. There are definitely way better reasons to go and buy a different phone rather than this one. And definitely when it comes down to the performance side, this performance is not bad, but it's definitely not like that great either. And if you're going to go through and pick up a phone in 2025, it definitely makes a lot more sense to go and buy a phone that's going to be giving you more capability when it comes down to it. So overall, what I will definitely tell you is that I think a phone like a Google Pixel 5 is still a decent phone, but it's not a phone I would recommend people to buy anymore. It holds up well when it comes down to its, kind of display stuff and some back camera stuff and software experience and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't hold up that well when it comes down to the performance. Really good camera quality is not really here on this phone. Some more flagship features like 120 hertz, display and, reverse wireless charging and those things. And phones have advanced so much since the Pixel 5 from 5 years ago. So it does make a lot more sense to maybe go and buy a device that might be giving you a better experience when it comes down to it. So think of phones like a Google Pixel 9, a Pixel 9 Pro, a Galaxy S23, or an iPhone 15 or 15 Pro are all way better phones than this particular one. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.